President Donald Trump's nominee for Assistant Secretary for Health, Dr. Brian Christine, said its thesis can persist to be errand, stated in a recent Senate confirmation hearing that he opposes the use of puberty blockers and other drug treatments for children experiencing gender dysphoria, marking a clear shift from previous policy. Dr. Christine clarified that gender dysphoria, which is characterized by distress over a perceived mismatch between a person's gender identity and their biological sex, is a genuine psychological condition. However, he emphasized that, in his view and according to scientific studies, compassionate counseling and support are the most effective treatments for minors. He cited data suggesting the majority of children who receive supportive counseling can outgrow gender dysphoria by their late teens, and thus are spared the risks and uncertainties associated with medical interventions. This stance stands in contrast to that of previous HHS assistant secretaries who had supported medical treatments for young people questioning their gender. The nomination comes amid increased national debate over transgender health care, legislation in numerous states restricting access to gender-affirming care for minors, and evolving federal guidance regarding the rights of transgender youth. Dr. Christine's appointment could signal a broader shift in federal policy and influence how future cases and medical guidelines are considered across the United States. Moving from health policy to immigration, the Trump administration is weighing policy changes affecting illegal immigrant laborers in industries such as agriculture and hospitality. Tom Homan, White House Border Czar, stated in a recent interview that officials from multiple government departments, including agriculture, labor, and homeland security, are actively discussing possible reforms. While Homan reiterated that President Trump has ruled out broad amnesty, the administration is exploring whether targeted exceptions or adjusted policies might be crafted for certain essential sectors. He stressed his role is to execute, not shape, administration policy, and underscored that should the president announce a specific plan for farm or hospitality workers, Immigration and Customs Enforcement would act accordingly. No specifics on these potential measures have been made public, leaving both workers and employers in critical industries awaiting clarification. These discussions reflect broader national conversations about the economic impact of unauthorized labor, worker shortages in essential industries, and the balance between border enforcement and market realities. Complementing these administrative deliberations, Republican Senator Bernie Moreno has introduced bold new legislation aimed at strengthening accountability for employers who knowingly hire illegal immigrants. The Safe Hire Act would impose significantly harsher penalties on CEOs and chief human resources officers of publicly traded companies who certify compliance with federal employment eligibility laws, but are later found in violation. Under the proposal, executives could face up to 10 years in prison and $1 million in fines for false certification. Knowingly employing illegal workers could result in up to 20 years of imprisonment and a $5 million fine. The legislation also requires annual SEC filings confirming employment practices and disclosure of any significant deficiencies related to eligibility verification. Supporters argue that such deterrents are necessary to prevent exploitation, safeguard American wages, and hold corporate leaders personally responsible. Detractors, however, critique the emphasis on punitive measures and question whether such efforts address the underlying causes of labor market violations, such as complex immigration laws and economic incentives. This legislative push comes amid a renewed federal crackdown on illegal hiring, highlighted by recent high-profile enforcement actions like the recent raid of a California cannabis facility. The move reflects intensified scrutiny on company practices and ongoing partisan divides over immigration. Relatedly, Congress has recently passed a reconciliation bill that boosts funding for immigration and customs enforcement operations, signaling a federal commitment to more rigorous enforcement while legislative debate over the appropriate balance of penalties and protections continues. In another high-profile legislative development, the House of Representatives has approved the Genius Act, a groundbreaking stablecoin bill, by a decisive vote of 308 to 122, sending it to President Trump's desk for signature. The Genius Act, short for Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins, establishes the first federal regulatory framework for stablecoins, a type of cryptocurrency that maintains a steady value, usually pegged directly to the U.S. dollar. This measure follows earlier Senate passage of the bill by 68 to 30 and is part of a broader congressional focus on digital assets during what lawmakers have dubbed Crypto Week. Despite having survived a rocky procedural vote in the House, where 13 Republicans joined Democrats in a failed effort to block floor debate, the bill's passage is considered a major step toward integrating digital currencies into the established financial regulatory environment. Proponents of the Genius Act argue that clear federal guardrails for stablecoins will encourage responsible innovation, improve investor confidence, and maintain U.S. competitiveness in the rapidly evolving global digital economy. The move also comes as regulators and markets worldwide debate how best to balance financial innovation with consumer and systemic protections following the dramatic volatility experienced by cryptocurrencies in recent years. Shifting focus to international trade, a long-standing dispute between the United States and Canada over lumber imports has re-emerged as American producers seek to tighten controls on Canadian timber. The core of the conflict centers on differing approaches to land and forest management. In Canada, 90% of forests are publicly owned, and provincial governments set access and pricing for logging companies, while in the U.S., private landowners dominate the sector and prices are determined by market forces. American industry representatives have long accused Canada of unfairly subsidizing its timber through government management and claimed that this allows Canadian softwood lumber to be exported at below-market prices, a practice known as dumping. The dispute, dating back to the 1980s, has led to repeated cycles of tariffs, negotiations, and litigation at the World Trade Organization. With the Trump administration placing greater emphasis on rebalancing trade relationships and supporting domestic manufacturing, U.S. advances in the dispute may trigger new rounds of tariffs or trade talks, raising concerns about potential price increases for home builders and consumers, as well as diplomatic friction between the neighboring countries. The decades-old softwood lumber feud serves as a reminder of the complex interplay between national economic interests, government resource policies, and international trade frameworks at a time of shifting global priorities.